الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah, Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Him, we praise Him, we glorify Him. We beseech Him to send His choicest salutations upon His most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and upon all those who choose to tread His path until the last day. So for those who might not be aware, I'm not Sheikh Mahar Shukri. I know we look alike, mashallah. But he stuck on a flight in Canada. Make dua for him when he comes back. Safe, inshallah. He's planning on being in New York for the whole week. And we're always blessed that he reaches out beforehand saying, you know, is there a day I can come and speak at the IC? So he's going to be coming tomorrow. He'll be speaking at our Arafat halaqah, which will also start around the same time, 6:30ish. We'll be doing a dua also tomorrow. We'll talk about a little bit today why that's something we're going to be doing. But if you were here for our qiyam in Ramadan, for example, and you remember we did a dua all together communally, we'll probably do something similar to that tomorrow prior to Maghrib coming in. But definitely come tomorrow if you can. Tonight, whether you're fasting or not today, if you can stick around. Also, we're keeping the building open till 10:30. We're going to have iftar, dinner for everyone, so please do stay for that. And then we'll wrap up and be here till Isha time. We'll pray Isha together and then head out of the building, inshallah. For those of you who typically come to my Monday night halaqah, we're looking at a text called the Book of Assistance. We're not going to do that today. And next week, we won't have that halaqah because of the long weekend. We'll resume again 2 Mondays from now. Given that we're in these blessed days of Dhul Hijjah, and tomorrow is the most auspicious day on our calendar, the day of Arafat, may Allah make us from those who benefit from it and accept all of our du'as that we invoke Him by on that day. And we are just a couple of days away from Eid al-Adha. I thought what would be more appropriate was for us to take a deeper dive into some of the significance of this, and to think about how it is that it relates to us. I also thought it would be good, in the context of some of that, to look at a really amazing sermon that the Prophet ﷺ gives on the day of Arafah in his farewell Hajj, but to think about how what he's leaving behind connects more broadly to some of the prevailing themes that we can take from these days of Dhul Hijjah. The Abrahamic narrative is something that likely a lot of us have been exposed to at some juncture in our lives, whether as young children or as we get older, or especially around these days of Hajj. You hear it getting quoted again and again in various places. And that could be sitting in a khutbah at Jum'ah, or you could be going to a dars someplace, or just bombarded with all kinds of media on various social media platforms that are giving indications of the fact that there's over 1 million people right now who have already made their way towards Mina. May Allah accept their Hajj. And there's so many who are sharing with us various hadith, various segments of the narratives of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, his wife Hajar, peace be upon her, their son Ismail alayhi salam, so much in detail. But there has to be relevance to us still. And the broader understandings of these are not rooted in absolute interpretations as such. The benefit of narratives like this and our ability to engage in conversation across becomes important so that we can broaden our perspective, right? I was sitting with some friends of mine in my office once. One was from Bangladesh, the other African American. We're talking about the story of Musa alayhi salam, Moses, and the segment of the story that deals with Exodus, so the emancipation of the people of Israel from the tyranny of Pharaoh. And my friend who's African American said to both of us that in my house, we celebrate the Mosaic narrative quite often, especially given that my grandparents were slaves in this country, and what it means that an entire population that was enslaved was now emancipated from that slavery is something that we quite often dig deep into in our home. And my Bengali friend, he said to both of us, I've never thought about the story of Musa alayhi salam in that way. Do you get what I mean? And the notion isn't to just think in ways that quite often religion gets approached by not us necessarily, but by the ones who are giving it to us, that give insight that says this is the only insight that one can take. Because how can you only have one insight from a story? How can you only take from it one perspective or one viewpoint when the idea is that a religion that claims a universality that is in relation to a Old Testament and a New Testament in the sense that it's a final testament for all of mankind, and is meant to be read by people from all over the world, there's got to be room for people to come and say, well, this is how this story relates to me. This is where and how I engage it in some capacity. What I'd like for you to do, and if you haven't been to one of our halakas before, we do a lot that's rooted in discussion with one another. You don't want to only speak if you feel like what you're saying is the most correct thing. Nor do you want to shy away from sharing a thought because you think it's somehow going to be wrong. But just share what it is that comes to mind. On the other end of it, you want to be in a place where you are not jumping to correct or remedy what somebody's saying, but you're just listening and hearing and taking in. It's not a listening to respond, but a listening to understand. And so where I want us to start is if you could turn to the people sitting next to you, ideally in pairs, but if you're going to have more than a pair, which is just two people, right? Two people is not 8 people. So 2 people, ideally, but try to make it no more than 3. What are some of the things that you get drawn to within these days of Hajj? What parts of the story of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam resonate deeply with you and why? The story of Hajar, peace be upon her, of Ismail alayhi salam, the establishment of the city of Mecca, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's experiences around the day of Arafat, the farewell khutbah, the verses that come down at those times, whatever it is that you have connection to or you might know of. And even if it's not things that you know so deeply, things that you might see not as just recounting of stories, right? We're not going to regurgitate a story. That's not the idea. But what am I taking from it? In Surah Al-Yusuf, the Quran says, so tell them a tale. Perhaps they might reflect. This is the idea of having access to these narratives, that they're meant to invoke within us an opportunity for contemplation and reflection, to have insight. And it's in a timeless text that means that where the text does not change, but you and I change, how it is that we relate to the text should also be in a state that's not schizophrenic in the sense that it's in flux, but you and I should not be the same people every time we're going back to the text. So how it resonates within us should be meaningful in a certain way. So when you turn to the person next to you, don't just repeat a story. If you heard somebody offer an insight, share what the insight is, but give an opportunity for your own vulnerability to say, well, why is this something that resonates deeply within me? Why is this something that I can take from in ways that actually compel me to then act upon it? from the standpoint of ethics, of morals, in terms of my practice, my conviction, my belief. If we can take a quick minute, you can turn to the person next to you. What are some of the things that you find to be most meaningful from these days of Dhul Hijjah, the practices, the emphasis, the tradition? What are some of the things that resonate deeply within you around the narratives that are rooted in these traditions? And then we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead, just for a few minutes. Okay, so what are some of the things that we're discussing that are coming up for people? Who wants to start? What did you talk about? What did you say, Ruby?
I said Serena. Absolutely. Then you got saved by the bell. Make her go. I'm gonna go back to DC. Okay.
This is great, whatever's happening here right now. But whenever you're ready, we'll speak. Yeah? Susu, you want to start us off? What did you guys talk about?
Well, Safi and Biham had great input. Biham, I guess, kind of touched on the concept of legacy and thinking about how our stories begin with our forefathers or with those that come before us, and she kind of touched more on her grandfather, which is really beautiful. And then Safi touched on intentionality and how our intentions or what we do is not just one-dimensional. So also Ta'ala is very merciful and he sees beyond just what we're doing, even though we tend to make mistakes and do little slip-ups. There is value and merit in trying and keep going forward.
How do you get that from these days of Dhul Hijjah?
For me, it's like, for example, I didn't know about Dhul Hijjah until like the day before. And I was like, oh, okay, so like my intention was like I was going to fast. So I fasted until like yesterday, but then I realized like someone had told me on TikTok like, hey, you're supposed to actually make up your obligatory fast first, and then you do like voluntary fast. And I didn't know that at the time. So like I was really upset with myself because I was like, I did all this work, why would I be so stupid to like not think about that? But then I was like, Allah is so merciful that the fact that He even put like that information in front of me the day before, and then I learned about it as I was fasting, and then the day that I was like, I was like, oh, I'm on day 700 left. Like I learned about that, so I took a break, and I was like, wow, alhamdulillah, like okay, I made up those days that I was supposed to like that I missed for Ramadan, and now I can do any other volunteer fast that I want. So I was like, Allah didn't like, curse me or whatever. He put that knowledge in me for a reason, and the fact that I now know this information for the rest of my life, it's because of the intention of like what I had to do. So I had the right intention. It's just that I feel like for me personally, I'm so hard on myself that I don't realize how merciful Allah is, and that take a break, like take a breather, like it's good.
Yeah, subhanallah, jazakallah khair. And there are different opinions on this point also, by the way, where if you have obligatory fasts, can you have a dual kind of intention on a recommended fast day or not? Allah knows best, right? And what about the idea of legacy?
I was thinking about how we start the story with Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then we talk about how his story propels the seerah of the Prophet. And so I was thinking a lot about how like the du'as of our grandfathers and our grandparents and the people in our family propel our own stories forward. And I recently learned some information about my grandfather that I didn't know beforehand. And I was thinking like, oh wow, like I really love my grandfather, but I only know him as my grandfather. And I don't know him in like his youth or the other things that are important to him. And then that means like, I also don't know like the du'as that he made, and I won't start crying, like there's like a whole lot. And I won't get to know until like the akhirah and I get to see him again, inshallah. So yeah, I was thinking about that, and then yeah.
Inshallah. May Allah grant you the best of reunions and the highest level of Jannah with your grandfather and all of your loved ones, inshallah. Inshallah, you're going to say something?
We talked about the whole practice of Hajj and how we follow all the practices from Ibrahim alayhi salam and everything that he did. I was recently asked by someone, why is it that all religion kind of happened from Middle East, or why are the most practice religion from a specific region, and I never really thought about it, and this might not be the right answer, but when I was reflecting, I thought about the relationship with Ibrahim alayhi salam and Allah, and how he considered him waliullah, to a point that the closeness and his sacrifice and everything he did, Allah gave so much barakah that all the prominent religion came from his generation. And sometimes the good we do maybe it won't be seen in ours, but future generations that are going to be coming after us, it will be reflected on them. And until today, because of the relationship and sacrifice, we are doing what we're doing today. So that's what we talk about.
Jazakallah khair. Anyone else? What did you discuss? Yeah, Noor.
You spoke on the correlation between sacrifice and trust. So we distinguished 2 points of sacrifice and trust. The first point of distinction was when Abraham trusted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the extent where he put his family, a newborn baby, in a land that he was not committed. And so that was a level of trust and sacrifice. And then this level of trust and sacrifice intensified when his son got older. So the intensity of sacrifice with the dream for the Hajj. So that's what we discussed.
Jazakallah khair. Anyone else? Maybe a couple more people. Yeah.
I thought of something similar like that. To me, what touches me the most is that not only that he left his family here, he makes this prayer in Surah Ibrahim. He says that, stay at the heart of other people for my family, so that they may give thanks. So for me, it's I feel that he didn't just trust Allah, but at the same time, he was I have this prayer for my family too. It's not just oh, I trust Allah, I'm out. He was he makes this prayer. So for me, I really like that prayer, which is, he's asking Allah to expand the heart of other people, which is, really outside of your control. And to make that for your family, for me, I always feel that.
MashaAllah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Kind of going off of that, we were talking about the strength in having a pious family too, where the way that his family responded to him having this command could have also shaped the way that obviously he's going to follow Allah's command, but hearing how Ismail and Hajjaz would respond to it makes it so much easier to follow the commands of Allah.
Anyone else? What did we discuss? Yeah.
I was going to say something similar. I guess what we talked about was kind of how there was 3 main themes, the obedience of Ibrahim and the commands that we got from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then also the obedience that his son Ismail had. It's kind of beyond imagination to think that he would consciously make those decisions, but our faith is so strong that they did. And then also, obviously, what also resonated with me was the sort of anxiety that Hajar had when she was trying to take care of her newborn child, and she was just overwhelmed with what to do to try to feed that child or take care of it. That she went between the mountains of Safa and Marwa, and we kind of just follow in the footsteps of that when we look for Hajj. That just kind of resonated with me because of how concerned she was to make sure that she could provide.
Anyone else? Last thoughts? So why is this important as an exercise? Or what is this kind of reflection meant to do if we take it to its logical conclusion? What is it meant to inform then for you and I? How does it play in terms of its relevance in our day-to-day existence? Does the question make sense? Why? Why any of this? What is it meant to do for me? yeah, when you reflect on it, you draw the meaning, then what's next?
To be able to implement that back into your life, because if you're not, like the Quran constantly says, you know, have you not thought about it? Are you not thinking, like, for those who are wise or intelligent? So taking that reflection and then, but not just keeping it to as like a thing that you memorized or remembered, but rather taking that and then turning it into day-to-day actions which bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And that's what the crux of all of this ends up being. When you are now given insight into this narrative of these individuals who exist historically, and to understand and recognize the excerpts of their life that's presented to us is not given to us just so we engage in rote memorization, but the fundamental increase for you and I is only yielded if we can understand what is being presented to us is how and what informs the decisions that they make. The choices that they are engaging in when they are in real circumstances. They're in a place where throughout the course of their days, their weeks, their months, just like you and I, are consistently presented with opportunity to choose choices. We are shown in the Abrahamic narrative what went into the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam's decision making. And not just in the prism of, do I slaughter my son or not? Which is a hard thing to deal with. But beyond the aspect of acts and choosing acts, we also see that the Prophet Ibrahim is choosing perspective. He's in a place where he has consciousness, he has awareness. Hajar, peace be upon her, is choosing perspective. Ismail alayhi salam is choosing perspective. But whether it's an inward or outward state, the thread across all of these stories is going to be, this is how these people decided their decisions, and this is where they ultimately landed in terms of the decision they decided upon. What are you going to do? How do you make your decisions? What is it that informs you in the course of your day-to-day? When you have narrative that tells us that the Prophet Ibrahim's family, his townspeople, literally catapult him into a fire, and the angel comes and presents himself, saying that I'm here for you. And Ibrahim alayhi salam asks, are you my Lord? And the angel says no. And he says, then I have no use for you. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. All he needs is the divine. The recognition of the decision that says, I'm going to take my child and my wife and leave them in a desert. The recognition of a decision of a wife to say, Allahu amraka bihadha, that has Allah commanded you with this. When he says yes, then we're good. The Jurhum come and they surround the water that is bursting at the feet of Ismail alayhi salam. This is how the city of Mecca is established. But Hajar, peace be upon her, is a black woman engaging now an entire tribe of men and is still able to say, the water is under my authority. What is fundamentally going on there? How do we understand it? Not as just, this is something I learned or I memorized, but I can extrapolate meaning from it so that it then informs the decisions I make, the choices that I'm choosing. That just like these people were presented with scenarios and they had to now act upon what it was that was in front of them, you and I are engaged similarly, and they always were choosing Allah. Hawa, desire, was not what it was that they chose in those moments. Was there difficulty at times? The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam doesn't get wahi and vision that says, go and do this to your son, and instantaneously he does it. But he has to wrestle with this a little bit. And Ismail alayhi salam is the one that says to him, what's going on? And when he finds out, he says, do what Allah told you to do. but they're in this place where they're choosing Allah. And they're choosing to yield to the idea that submissiveness in this religion is not based off of picking and choosing, nor is it about engaging in such a way where there's not struggle, there's not difficulty. But the idea is to not build a relationship or a conceptualization of a God that in turn makes that God subservient to you, but you recognize that I am subservient to that God. And then it comes down each and every time in these stories. The choices are presented. What direction are you going to go in? I am going to always remember that Allah knows best. I'm going to have presence. I'm going to have consciousness. There's going to be awareness to my decisions. I can sit and I can start to think more deeply. Why does the Prophet Ibrahim make these du'as? What does it mean to me? How do I recognize that within the opportunity for real basira, a vision of the heart, it necessitates having a combination of hindsight, foresight, and insight? That I am thinking about progeny that will come after. And I am thinking about ancestry that struggles so that I can be where I am. And I'm thinking about the importance of this moment and how it's going to be a reflection of what comes ahead, as well as what it was that this was built upon. That everything doesn't revolve around me. Perspective becomes a choice when you are God-centric and not egocentric. But it's all rooted in decision-making. It's all rooted in choices. There's other reasons as to why we want to know these stories, right? We took some people from the IC to Palestine before we all experienced COVID here in the city. And may Allah make us a generation that witnesses a free Palestine in our life. And you can go there, and if you don't know your history, and you don't know the stories, somebody's going to tell you a version of your history that is not accurate. And they will utilize it in a way that quite often history plays a role strategically, that those who have power and have authority, they yield more gain in their privileged existence by leveraging the lack of literacy that people have, that they need to be having. That's another conversation we could have. But I want us today to think about it. And I say that example to say that there's probably tons of examples that we could go into as to why these narratives are important. But as we go into Arafat, may Allah make us from those who benefit from it. This is a sticking point that you got to think about, because everything and anything goes into this idea of decision-making and choices. Why some people struggle with Islam as a religion in comparison to other religions is because the way this religion emphasizes accountability is not like the way other religions do. You don't get salvation because somebody else died for your sins in this religion. It's not to knock somebody else's belief. Your utterance of certain convictions, beliefs, are not in and of itself enough of a reason to guarantee that you will have entrance into Jannah. May Allah make us all people of Jannah. But this is a world of action and decision making. That's what this dunya is. When Allah gifts us the stories of the Prophet Ibrahim and his family and tells you that they are so important that in every prayer you pray, man, you are making dua for the Prophet Abraham and his family. Not so you're just rotely again regurgitating it, but thinking about why. What is it meant to aid me in as I move forward in this worldly existence? How do I begin to think about, well, what goes into my decision making to begin with? What informs my choices? Because if we simplify it, not to the sense that it's simplistic, but simplify it to the base of what our deen teaches us, You can either go in the direction of what Allah wants and make a decision that's shar'an, or you can make a decision that's based in hawa. So it's either or. When you have tawfiq, when people say to you, may Allah give you tawfiq, tawfiq is a success where Allah's desire, His irada and your irada, they match up together. That's success. Success isn't, I got the job. Success isn't, I got the girl. Success isn't, I convinced this person or that person's. Success in the form of tawfiq is my will and Allah's will. Our desires, they have synergy. They're harmonious. And this is what the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is doing. And he goes through his difficulties, he goes through his struggles, and Allah is showing us that, hey, here are people who get it. Be like them. When you're making your decisions, when you're making your choices, recognize what it is that's going into that process. So that it's not just once a year you revisit certain passages of a text. You are in a place where you hear it, but you're not listening to it. It's not informing something the way that, especially at the juncture in life that most of us are in this room. The youngest people in the room are my kids. I don't even know where one of them is right now. One of them's right there. The other one, I don't know, but I got two, so it's okay. And here's another young kid, but that's not mine. MashaAllah. But you have to think about it. And you have to think about what makes it difficult to think about it. You cannot utilize religion as a pastime or a hobby or as a source of entertainment, which is, again, not to knock anybody, but that's what happens for a lot of people these days. I go into spaces and I am moved by just the articulation of words rather than the substance of words. There are gems of scholars that are within the boroughs of New York City that most of us do not benefit from simply because of the deep accents that they have of their country of origin. The opportunity to not see religion as a sociological identity variable, but as actually something that I embrace through a prism of discursive theology, where if somebody asked me why I am Muslim, I would be able to say, this is why I choose to be Muslim. Not because my parents were Muslim, because the Abrahamic narrative challenges this idea. When he asks his people, why do you do what you do? They can only get to a conclusion that says, because that's what the elders did before us. But when they ask him in response, not directly, but it's a back and forth in Surah Al-Shu'ara, the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he knows why he believes in his God. My God feeds me and gives me drink. My God heals me of every ailment. And that ailment is not just physical, but ailments of all kinds. Emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical. But he can explain to you why he chooses to do what he does. Why he chooses to have the perspective he has. Can you do the same thing? Why do you choose Islam? Why do you choose to be Muslim? And that's what the story is about. He chooses submission. Why? And why is that an important thing to choose? If we don't know the answers to these or have never thought about them, then it's going to be something that we engage in only at major life events. The beauty of this deen is not that it only comes out at a wedding or on a holiday or on a funeral. It's not practiced seasonally, just in the course of a month of 30 days of fasting or around a pilgrimage to a blessed city or on days that are holy days that we now engage in it in these manners. But it's an everyday experience because every day is important. And this is important to understand. One of my good friends, whose name is also Ibrahim, may Allah grant him peace. I flew early in the morning on Friday to the other side of the country to be with people as we buried him. And unexpectedly, he passed from this world, leaving behind his wife and 3 amazing young boys. May Allah grant them ease. And if you went to this funeral, man, or you saw pictures of it, or you joined the Zoom, if the Zoom worked, I don't know. I wasn't watching the Zoom. There was people from everywhere, all walks of life. People who are of every race, every culture, people who are of every faith tradition, that all came to be able to honor the rights that our brother Ibrahim had over us. But he didn't wake up that morning thinking that the rest of the day would be his last breaths. Nor did the people around him think that as well. And when we can understand why this is relevant, in that every day you wake up is a gift, and every day that you're given is not because you deserve it, but it's an opportunity to demonstrate that you fundamentally get it. You know what it is that you should be in submission to. The Hajj gives us immense opportunity for reflection, because 1 million people right now are walking towards the place of Mina. They will shortly be going to the place of Arafat. May Allah accept it from them. They'll spend the night in Muzdalifah. They'll go and pelt the jamarat and sacrifice their animals and shave their heads and cut their hair. They'll continue on and they'll make their tawaf and their sa'i. Why are they doing it? What went into that decision? Why did some of them leave their entire lives behind, pack up everything, and not just get there a week ago, but about 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, to make what is actually a once-in-a-lifetime journey? What are they choosing that sometimes we forget when we have now a day in front of us that we can now present to ourselves a recognition of what it is that I actually become submissive to? And as they're making tawaf around the Kaaba, what do you run circles around every day? As they orient themselves in the direction of Mecca, what is it that is actually your qibla, that draws your attentiveness and gives you direction in the course of your day? And you have to think about it in this way. These are people who were submitting to Allah. What do I submit to? What informs my decisions? What informs my choices? Why do I do these things? Why am I a Muslim? Do you get what I'm saying? I want you to turn to the persons next to you. What are you taking away from this so far? And then we're going to look at the last khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ, the farewell sermon, to see how it attaches. Because the Prophet, he is giving now his own advice and counsel to his companions, because he knows he's going to leave from the world soon. He even says it in the khutbah. I don't know if I'm going to be with you beyond this year. So these are points that he's leaving in this sense of legacy, right? Wasiyah, the idea of a will is not just that I leave behind what is there for my inheritors. When Surah Al-Asr says, وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, right? Tawaso, when it means come together, wasiyah is also, if you're leaving from the world, like, what would be advices you gave to your loved ones before you passed from this world? What are things that you would share with them so that they would be able to move forward in their time in this world with a sense of meaning and purpose, right? And so we want to think about it, because the Prophet is also telling his companions, when you're making your decisions, don't forget these things. It's not just something that we know exists, but informs us in the course of our day-to-day decisions. If you can turn to the persons next to you, what are we taking away so far from what we're hearing from each other, what we're talking about, and then we'll come back and discuss we'll take a look at the last khutbah of the Prophet that was done on the day of Arafah. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we're taking away so far? What's it bringing up for people? Who wants to start? What are we talking about? Yeah.
So we were talking about how a lot of people believe Islam based on being born Muslim or the pressure from society, and it's really about Iman, and it's not a bad thing to question, and there are individuals that feel like, oh, you should just believe, and not question, and look for answers and seek for things for yourself. Because I believe generally going out and speaking to different scholars, going to different masjids, and finding answers for yourself and having self-belief is something everyone should do, and not just believe based off society or your parents or being born Muslim. And that's something we talked about. So.
Well, you can't believe something if somebody else believes it, right? How can that work in that way? You know? You can't say, I just believe in whatever he believes or she believes. Because how does it work? Belief is within you. And at some point you gotta think about, what do I actually believe in? Do you know? What else? What else did we discuss? Yeah.
It's not what I discussed, but like, since he just mentioned that, something came to mind. So one of my co-workers, he told me that, so he does not believe in God, but he was asking, because he knows that I'm religious and stuff, so he's asking me, what if, he studied Islam, so he knows like what's to be done and stuff like that. So he said, I just like the whole aspect of like the prayers, like we have prayers, and then the community and fasting, like those are all very good things. It helps in building, like everything that we have, it helps in building community and like being happy in life in general. So he said, what if I do not believe in God, but I still want to do all these things, like all the rituals, but I don't want to believe in God, like what do you think? So like he just wants to do it because to have a good life in this world, because he thinks like it's a nice model of having a good life. But I feel like I told him that if you do not believe in it, then you won't be able to like do it, like you won't, like today you might pray, but tomorrow, like when you have busy with work, you will not get up and go do your prayer. So either eventually you'll start believing in it because of the power of those ritual acts, or the second thing is that you will stop it altogether, because without belief in your heart, like you cannot carry on and do those things that we do as Muslims, at least not in your adult life, unless like you're born Muslim and you were doing it because of your parents. So I wanted to understand, like, what do you think in that case of like, you know, someone who does not believe?
Me? What do I think? I don't think about a lot of things, mashallah. No, a lot except from the brother, you know. It's crazy to think about. This guy is not Muslim, and he's praying prayers that most Muslims don't even pray, right? What does it mean? Do you know what I mean?
He's
right?
not praying, he's like, he wants to.
He wants to pray. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a thought. I've never met the person. It's not for me to have thoughts about people that I've also never met. But I think within this, you know, there's interesting kind of dynamics that I think we can extrapolate for the purpose of this discussion. You have to wrestle with a question that at some level, what our texts show us is the need for struggle in engaging in what Allah wants from you to do in order to have increase in the religion, right? That it's not going to always just be as a matter of convenience. You know, it's not going to just be when I feel like it, but it's going to be at a point where certain things might be hard, some things might be tough. So what makes it a God-centric religion? It assumes that there's certain things that Allah asks you to do that are easy to do, certain things that you're going to be asked to do that are really hard and you struggle with, and certain things that fundamentally you might not get why they're done that way, but it doesn't need for you to understand it in order for it to be true. Do you see what I mean? And that can be really hard, because when you get now to a place where it's, okay, what am I going to decide to do? And you don't want to engage in self-deprecation, but you got to think about it. Why do I not pray during the course of the workday? What goes into me deciding that I'm going to cut corners on some of the fara'id or make validations for some of the things that are haram? And not in a way that is devoid of understanding that a big part of this is when you fall, you get back up. That's why the companions are such great, tangible examples, and you want to read their stories, because they made a lot of mistakes. It's not a religion that teaches us to pursue perfection foolishly. Do you know? And for this brother, I don't mean to be obnoxious, I'm sorry, I know I'm an obnoxious person, forgive me for that. But, Allah make it a means of, entry for his hidayah, inshallah, right? And may he increase you for being a good example to him, that he sees something within you that is a source of light, and he's trying to figure out, what does she have? Because I want to have that. Do you know? And that's what escapes a lot of people, right? Is balance, contentment, a sense of just how to be, essentially. Do you know what I mean? This will be the last thing that I say here, and I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot on it. But sometimes just because somebody's saying something, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're actually expressing or intending to express. They just get limited by the language that they have access to. Do you know? So what he's saying in his words is not necessarily also what it is that his heart is intending for him to say. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? Allah give him and all of us hidayah, inshallah. What else do we talk about in our groups? What are we taking away from this so far before we start to look at the farewell khutbah of the Prophet? Yeah.
I'm an econ major, so sometimes I look at things in a graphical way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Safat, in regards to Ibrahim alayhi salam, he went to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a purified heart, and then afterwards he mentions the story of Ismail alayhi salam. So the journey of a purified heart, that's how I look at ways of Hajj, this 14 years that, and in those 14 years of Ibrahim alayhi salam with the sun, those points of interception, the choices that he made, were points of interception that we could look at. Some points maybe sacrifice and trust, other points maybe other points of interception where you can see some truth.
Yeah, subhanAllah. And these are why prophets in our tradition are different from prophets in other traditions. Right? When you talk to people that come from different religious backgrounds, they're not always going to be in the place where they're understanding where you're coming from as a Muslim on things that might seem like they're convening points, but they have a different understanding of it because of their own socialization. Prophets in our tradition are meant to be exemplars. Like, that's the idea. The idea is that they're meant to be people that you take kind of insight from in terms of just how to be in this world. And it's not that there's oscillation, but there's complexity because everybody has multiple facets to them. Things change when there's different people involved in the picture. When you have family that also is impacted by what you do. When there's children now that are in front of you, and you have to think about also consequently what your behavior does to them. And what are the things that we can extrapolate in terms of values and ethics, right? Modernity is pretty strange in that we live in a time where corporations and entities now have values. But this religion is something that says that you as an individual are supposed to have values. Not something that's intangible, like an institution, but the person is supposed to be driven by a sense of ethics, by a sense of morals. Those things exist within your heart, not in a place of the stomach or the sexual organs. We wouldn't say that compassion resides in my stomach, right? And this all converges now into a lived example that says, hey, like, what was going on here? That they are pushed to these limits and they're still yielding to this. And what's the end result? A place of contentment in a state that is inward, that allows for there to be balance when so much of the world struggles with having just a state of chaos inwardly. You see? If you want to pull up on your phones, you just Google farewell sermon of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You'll find like different versions of this. And in the hadith, there are different narrations that have different wordings, slight variations, but the overall gist of it is the same. I'm going to read from my phone, and what I'm going to ask you to do is think about some of the things and points together and try to contextualize it. Right? The Prophet ﷺ is on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, the day of Arafat, which is tomorrow. May Allah make us from those who benefit from it. This is a day where the Hajjis, they stand on the plain of Arafat, and all they do is make dua. The Prophet, he says in the hadith, that Hajj Arafah, that Hajj is Arafah, that the standing in Arafah is one of the integral components to the Hajj. It's something that you have to do on the Hajj. And for us too, there's barakah in it. There's a recommended fast. The hadith says it serves as an expiation of misdeeds for the year prior and the year forthcoming. It's also a day in which you want to make dua. And tomorrow, if you're here with us, and Sheikh Ammar Shukri will be with us here tomorrow, and we'll have a halaqah, we'll make dua, and we'll have iftar tomorrow with that many more people here who will be coming. If you haven't signed up for our Eid programs or the other programs, please do so we just have an accurate head count. But I want us to look at this because the Prophet, peace be upon him, he is leaving this behind with his companions, 120,000 individuals who are standing with him. And as he is speaking, the words are being repeated so that those who are standing further back are able to take the message. And just think, why is this things that he is leaving behind to inform? Because you've heard these things before, some of you likely, but you want to hear it differently now. Or you want to think about it. How is it relevant to me? How is it relevant to the communities that we're building? How is it relevant to our day-to-day practice? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he delivers this on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, and he begins by praising and thanking Allah, and then he says, "O people, lend me an attentive ear, for I know not whether after this year I shall ever be amongst you again. Therefore listen carefully to what I am saying, and take these words to those who cannot be present here today." So just for a minute, this is the beginning of the sermon. And anything the Prophet ﷺ is going to say, these people are going to take it verbatim. Because he's already now got their attention. He's got them in a place where he's saying, this might be the last time some of you are going to hear something like this from me. I don't know if we're going to do this again a year from now. Embedded in this is an opportunity for us to think out for ourselves. The Prophet very much so understands the temporal nature of this world, but he's also giving an injunction to his companions. What I'm going to tell you, you have to take this to other people also. The taking of it is not just verbalized, but it's going to be actualized. So what's coming is important. It's not a talk that's for entertainment. There's purpose and education to this. It's meant to inform your behavior, your practice, the way you interact with yourself, the people around you, the world, nature, creation, and the creator of all things. So listen attentively. Be present. Because it's for you, and then you got to take it to everybody else. O people, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard the life and property of every Muslim as sacred trust. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Hurt no one, so that no one may hurt you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord, and that he will indeed reckon your deeds. Whenever I read this entire khutbah, the one sentence that always just strikes the most is hurt no one so that no one may hurt you. It's just the basis of what this entire mission that he has. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. He was sent to perfect, he says in his own words, good character, moral conduct, good behavior. Don't hurt anybody so that no one will hurt you. But I want you to do just these first two paragraphs that we read. If you have it in front of your phone, it's great. If not, just kind of retain what it was that I said. What are things that stick out to you? What are you taking from it? Why do you think the prophet starts in this way? Why is this kind of the initial premise that he's leading people in, right? The prophet is an amazing communicator. His speech is so remarkable. There's not any instance that you can look in the hadith where somebody is listening to him and says, I don't get what he's talking about. Or somebody comes to ask him something or engage him and they walk away saying, he didn't understand me and what I needed. The words that he leaves behind, many of them engaged through translation 14 centuries later and still are taking something from it. So just reflect these first two paragraphs. Why is the prophet starting this way and what are you taking from it? And then we'll come back and discuss and we'll start going through the rest of it as well. But go ahead. Okay, what are some of the things we're taking away just from these first two paragraphs? Right, O people, lend me attentive ear. And just as you regard this month, this day, this city is sacred. Right, these two first paragraphs. What are you taking away? Why do you think the prophet starts in this way? He says, O people, lend me an attentive ear, for I know not whether after this year I shall ever be amongst you again. Therefore listen carefully to what I am saying, and take these words to those who cannot be present here today. O people, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard the life and property of every Muslim a sacred trust. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Hurt no one so that no one may hurt you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord and that he will indeed reckon your deeds. Yeah. Well, it creates a perpetuating cycle, right? If you work with people who have just carried a lot of trauma and pain, do you know what I mean? Right? May Allah make it easy for all of us, right? Some people in this room, they have parents who do not treat them well. And those people's parents had parents that did not treat them well. And those people's parents had parents that did not treat them well. Right? There's an absence of people telling their kids that they love them, that they're proud of them, but a deep presence of negativity, toxicity, yelling, fighting, screaming. And so the cliches end up being very true, that hurt people. And all you start to do is create this perpetuating cycle that you're in this place where you cause pain and then someone causes pain back. Yeah, go ahead.
We also, one of the things that we talked about also kind of focused on that verse, and it to us was interesting because of the opposite, because it focuses on like the practicality of it, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows who Allah has made and we do have an egocentric part of us, and this line just kind of says, this is the practical advice I have to give to you. There is a spiritual component to your actions, but there's also a relationship, and if you hurt someone, they're going to hurt you back, and so there's like these two components, the spiritual, our relationship with Allah, but also your relationship with people. So I actually thought that was really interesting, that it recognizes who we are and who Allah has made us and what we're going to focus on.
Somebody else had their hand raised? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the character, and I think that brought to me like the hadith about a smile being sadaqah, and I think that in itself, how we treat others is important on the face, but I think it's also intersects with the notion of standing before our Lord, because it then turns into a matter of how we treat ourselves, because I can be miserable to everyone around me, and then I'm being miserable myself. Likewise, I can not return the goods and harm people physically and harm my own nafs as well.
Yeah, it's got a portion where it's going to hurt you back, right? Acting in these ways. Other thoughts? Yeah.
When I think of that phrase, it reminds me of the ayah in Surah Baraka when the angels tell Allah, you want to create humans to do bloodshed. And Allah says, I know what you know not. Right? So this is a reminder, kind of, don't hurt anyone because you're hurting yourself, but also tying into the capitalist society we live in, and we think a lot of bad is happening to us because of God or energies or things outside, but it's us hurting our own selves. No matter in what way you put, it's going to come back to you in some other way. But so that's why I think like putting it all around, if you hurt someone, it will come back to you one way or another.
And it ties this into what is foundational theology introduced to a population that had no belief in an afterlife. The absence of accountability in a Meccan society that allowed for female infanticide, various forms of discrimination and xenophobia, all types of challenges and issues. They didn't think there was anything that was going to come after. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, remember that you will indeed meet your Lord and that he will indeed reckon your deeds. And he says this after he has started by saying, I might not be here after this year. So you have death, the day of judgment, actions, and accountability, all right from the beginning. And they're setting a tone, a premise for everything that's going to come thereafter. And that's what a lot of this is. It's not a joke, but that's what a lot of it is, right? When you have a religion that has ritual to it, it has the danger of becoming overtly ritualized and ritualistic as a ends rather than a means to something. So when the companions asked the Prophet about a woman who she prays a lot and gives a lot in charity and does all these extra things, but her neighbors are harmed by her tongue, the Prophet ﷺ says, La khayra fiha hiya min ahli nar, that there's no good in her, she's from the people of Jahannam. May Allah protect us from it. And then they talk about a woman who, she just does the bare minimums. She's not doing a lot of extra stuff, just the prayers, charity, like basic, but nobody's harmed by her tongue. The Prophet says, hiya min ahli jannah, that she is from the people of paradise. The transformational nature of this is one that yields consciousness that then also has self-reflection that comes back to this place of accountability. You can decide to do what you want to do. You're just going to have to explain to Allah, why did you do it that way? Don't hurt people. Like, there's never a good reason to hurt someone. It's not something that a Muslim can think of doing in the name of Allah. That at your expense, I'm going to make people laugh. I'm going to play games with you and just think about relationships in a very immature way with no commitment. I'm not going to honor the amount of time that we spent together or that I told you that we would get married to each other. I'm going to be in a place where I am comfortable in letting you sit alone in a corner, knowing that you're fully by yourself and no one's greeting you or engaging you. I will gossip, I will backbite, and somehow think that that empowers me in some way. You're going to stand in front of Allah. What are you going to do on that day? What are you going to do when people come and they're going to carry that hurt? Because you feel something, that doesn't become a reason as to why you can just do whatever you want to. You got to find your healing, and may Allah grant us all healing. Allah has forbidden you to take usury, therefore all interest obligation shall henceforth be waived. Your capital is yours to keep. You will neither inflict nor suffer any inequality. Allah has judged that there should be no interest, and all interest due to Abbas ibn al-Muttalib be waived. Interest is haram in Islam. Riba is haram. And you have pre-existing relationships, contracts that exist in a pre-Islamic Arabian society. The Prophet came to abolish inequity, not enhance it or create it. Right? And we can get into a deeper conversation on this, but it's no joke. Right? Like what we're taught is the people who willfully engage in this riba, on the day of judgment, the angels are going to give them armor to wear. And they say, what is this? And they say, get ready to fight. And they say, who are we fighting against? They're saying, you're going to fight against Allah, because you engage in this practice. And just think, you think in an anti-black, white supremacist society where you have predatory lending practices, where only certain people historically were able to get homes at certain ways and others were prevented from owning land. When you think about just what it means to be able to shackle somebody in debt and ruin their credit and utilize money as a mechanism that is further creating inequity and oppression, you don't want to work for systems and structures that allow for these things to also exist. Every right arising out of homicide in pre-Islamic days is henceforth waived, and the first right that I waive is that arising from the murder of Rabi'a ibn al-Haritha. O men, the unbelievers indulge in tampering with the calendar in order to make permissible that which Allah forbade and to prohibit what Allah has made permissible. With Allah, the months are 12 in number. 4 of them are holy. These are successive, and one occurs singly between the months of Jumada and Shaban. Most of us probably don't know the months on the Islamic calendar. Right? If I was to give somebody a mic and say, tell me all of the names of the months, I'm not going to do that to anybody. Don't get nervous. But the principle here is that it's not in our authority to make something permissible that Allah made impermissible or vice versa. Because then you're just creating your own religion. Right? And this happens quite often. I think, I want, I feel is not the basis of this deen. You can struggle with something. But the minute you now start to shift from what is clearly and concisely established, you're just making your own religion at that point. This couple came to see me, and the brother is Catholic, the sister is Muslim, and you don't have to deny love that you have. That's not what we're talking about. And it's not easy. That's what I said. It's a struggle to live a God-centric life sometimes. But the guy said to me, what's the problem if we just have a wedding that is 50% Catholic and 50% Muslim? I said, there's no problem, man. You're a grown person. You can do whatever you want to. I said, but just realize if you're making it 50% Catholic and 50% Islamic, then you're neither of those things. You just made your own religion at that point, and that's your prerogative. You can do that. And here, where you get a lot of people that's not even in the direction of making so much permissible that is impermissible, which is a problem. Don't do that. But in the other direction, there's also the challenge, making things impermissible that are actually permissible. The amount of things that I could tell you that people told me growing up were haram, that in retrospect just didn't make any sense. There was a guy who once told me that I couldn't eat baked ziti. I love eating baked ziti. He's like, if you don't eat this, it's haram. And I was like, it's baked ziti. What is wrong with it? But I didn't have a basic understanding of what these words meant. And I already had a unconsciously formulated understanding of who God was, an angry old man in the sky. It just made me feel like everything I did was destined for Jahannam. And so it goes in both directions. You don't want to use the word haram very lightly, as much as you don't want to use words that remove the recognition that you and I are just from the ibad of Allah. We are not the lawmaker. Allah is the one that legislates certain things. And so you don't want to get caught in what the Meccans are doing and the people before, that they just played games based off of their own pursuit of wealth and dunya, that they turn religion into just a system of their whims. Do you get what I mean? And it's a challenge, right? I work with a lot of young people. It becomes hard. When you're a teacher, you want your student to actually surpass you. You don't want them to be lesser than you. Then you're not a good teacher. I don't want my kids to be in a place where they somehow have to assess themselves based off of who I am, but I also want them to be better human beings than I am. And this comes now where you have generational kind of push down. This is why Islam is not an inherited religion. Because just because your parents told you it's okay doesn't mean that it's still not haram. Just because an elder said to you, don't worry about it, you can pray it later, doesn't mean that it's still not fard. Do you get what I mean? And the Prophet's telling his people, right? And this was something that was on the top of his head. As he's leaving from this world, he's in a place where he's distraught, and he's asking the people who are around him, As-salah nas, that have the people made salah, have the people made salah, have the people made salah. Right? He experienced Musa alayhi salam when he's getting the gift of 5 daily prayers that started at 50, and every time he comes down from one level of heaven to the next, Moses says to him, go back, your people are not going to do this because my people didn't do what they were supposed to do. The Prophet says, I'm embarrassed to ask for anything less at this point. That you do 5, but it's written as 50. And so here the Prophet alayhi salam is telling his people, and they're gathered now to hear him, that you don't want to play games, but it's also not in your authority. You're not the one that decides to change these things. That's not something you can do. When they come to him, worship our gods for a day, we'll do yours for a day. Ours for a day, yours for a month. Ours for a day, yours for a year. He's not saying no out of personal preference. He's saying no because he's not the one that gets to decide to say yes or no to it. He just got to do what Allah says. And he can't barter on something like that. There's no compromise there. It's different from like the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, where he's able to make compromises on certain things. Here, there's no compromise. So take from the examples of those who did what they did before in order to make permissible that which Allah forbade and to prohibit what Allah has made permissible. It's better to not say something than to just speak out of a place of whims. Beware of Satan for the safety of your religion. He has lost all hope that he will be able to lead you astray in big things, so beware of following him in small things. So let's take a pause now. And this paragraph that's about shaitan, what do you take from that? And why is this an important thing for the Prophet to be telling his companions, especially in the context of what's preceded it? But why is this something that you think he's sharing with them? How do you relate to the recognition of the presence of waswasa potentially in your life, right? Bring it to a practical level, and then we'll come back and discuss. Just for 2 minutes, go ahead. Okay. So Kareem and Medina are passing out dates. These are my children, mashallah. Medina just graduated 5th grade, guys. Oh yeah. She actually had... They didn't call it a graduation ceremony, they called it a promotion ceremony. So she was promoted from 5th grade. Yeah. So what do we take away from this? Short paragraph on shaitan. Yeah.
For me, I just thought a bit about like how like with our sins, they come in gradually. Like as you commit a sin, it's not like you commit one big sin and then it's like over. it's like little things. So like with me, especially like with insecurities, like every time you doubt yourself or you say like, I'm not this, it's like you're feeding shaitan and he gets bigger. And for me, like Shireen was saying how she talks to herself, I talk to myself too. It's just like, no, like I got this, like I'm a good Muslim. Like, okay, I did one thing, but Allah forgives, because misery loves company and shaitan loves your company when you're miserable. So it's like making sure that you attack him before you attack yourself, because then you lead yourself to thinking, I don't even need this faith at all. And then at least you're not even suffering, like not even practicing, because of those little things that like build up into something big.
And that's what shaitan's trick is, right? It's not to just get you to commit the act, but to get you to commit the act as an avenue to get you to believe that you can't have a relationship with Allah because of the act, that you're outside of the fold of it, right? And do you understand now why in the beginning the Prophet is saying, don't hurt people? Like somebody's already down. Everybody's got crap going on in their lives. Everybody's got heaviness that they carry. You're a Muslim, you're supposed to be uplifting. You're supposed to give people glad tidings, right? Don't knock them down when they're already down. Help them to understand when they meet you that not only does God exist, but how would I know when I meet you that that God is Rahman, that that God is Rahim? Do you get what I'm saying? So just because Maghrib is coming quickly, to give a few other kind of quick summations of the rest of this, he says, O people, it is true that you have certain rights with regards to your women, but they also have rights over you. In the next paragraph, he says, O people, listen to me in earnest, worship Allah, say your 5 daily prayers, fast during the month of Ramadan, give your wealth in zakat, perform hajj if you can afford it. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white, except by piety and good action. Learn that every Muslim is a brother to every Muslim, and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Nothing shall be legitimate to a Muslim which belongs to a fellow Muslim, unless it was given freely and willingly. Do not therefore do injustice to yourselves. Remember one day you will meet Allah and answer your deeds. So beware, do not astray from the path of righteousness after I am gone. O people, no prophet or apostle will come after me, and no new faith will be born. Reason well, therefore, O people, and understand words that I convey to you. I leave behind me 2 things, the Quran and the Sunnah, and if you follow these, you will never go astray. In some variations, it speaks about only the Quran, and some it mentions the Quran and his family. There's different things you could read that reconcile where these variations come from. These are all within the Sunni tradition of Islam, the mention of the Prophet's family, the Quran, the Sunnah. All those who listen to me shall pass on my words to others, and those to others again. And may the last ones understand my words better than those who listen to me directly. O Allah, be my witness that I have conveyed your message to your people. Right? And this is where the verse of the Quran is revealed. Al-yawma lakum akmaltu deenukum, that today I have perfected for you your deen. The Prophet, in the broader frame of what we're talking about, he's helping to give people a framework when they're making their decisions. Hey, when you choose, don't choose racism. Hey, when you engage, don't forget to be kind to women. When you're choosing, choose to pray your prayers, fast Ramadan, choose to give your zakat. That's not an option. That's haram wealth for you to consume. Choose to perform your hajj as soon as you have the means to do so. Not when it's convenient, as soon as you have the means to do so. He's giving people an understanding. Base your decisions off of this. Don't forget these things. You have intellectual capacity. You have the mechanisms to be able to choose your choices. This is what Allah has given you distinct from the rest of creation. Embrace what makes you human at your core and make decisions by choosing beauty, by choosing positivity, by choosing goodness. Don't choose a sense of self-righteousness, just choose righteousness. Be in a place where you live remembering who your teacher is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let everybody else do what it is that they do. You don't wake up in the day to think that your success is just based off of the acquisition of the world, but your success is rooted in remembering the proportionality of this world in relation to the one that comes next. So of all the things that he mentions this idea multiple times. You're going to stand in front of Allah one day. One day you will stand in front of God. Don't be in a place where that belief or conviction is just something that is part of inherited theology, but let it be a part of the conviction and belief that if somebody asked you about it, you could say, I do believe that there is a day that I will stand in front of Allah after this one. May Allah make it a day of ease for us and grant each one of us and our loved ones entrance into His Jannah without any judgment. The Prophet ﷺ is building upon the teachings of the Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ and his beautiful family. And these are things that are given to us not so we just have story times and we tell people things, but then when we go out in the world, we get into a frenzy because we don't know how to make decisions. You're given it so it's a philosophy on life that you then exert an understanding of contentment. That qalb that is salim is rooted and acquired only by being in a state of submission to the divine. Because when you submit to anything else, which is what you do, whether you want to admit it or not, you are the abd of something. If you are an abd of wealth, then you will never be satisfied, and you will use the best years of your life chasing after things that likely somebody else is going to enjoy after you have passed from this world. If you are an abd of your physical beauty, then you will die 1,000 deaths again and again as you look in a mirror and you see an aging body, because you can't look deeper and recognize the existence of an eternal soul. If you pursue as an abd the validation of a creation that is looking to just put you in a box or only accepts you when you become that which you are not, none of it makes any sense. But be a worshiper of a creator who loves you more than a mother loves his child. He's not just watching you, but watching over you. That right now, 1.5 million people have left everything to go pursue a deeper relationship with that God. And there are millions more who would do anything to be in the seats that those people are in right now. May Allah accept from all of them. So you got to think about it in these days of Dhul Hijjah, and let it be something that permeates and then starts to inform and influence decisions. We're going to call the Adhan for Maghrib. Tomorrow, we're going to have iftar here again for the day of Arafat. You want to utilize the day. The day precedes, the night precedes the day in our tradition, right? So the 9th of Dhul Hijjah is upon us. The day of Arafat is auspicious. The Prophet would, on the plain of Arafat, be in a place where after the Fajr prayer, he would go to Arafah. Dhuhr and Asr were prayed together in Arafah, and as the night fell, they would go to Muzdalifah. So use the day, a part of it. We're going to do that here tomorrow and make dua together, but you want to make your own duas tomorrow. I don't know why Allah chose the 9th of Dhul Hijjah to be this day, but He's the most wise, not me. So just do it because He said that that's the benefit of it. Even just for a few minutes. Make dua and think about what are the du'as that I'm going to make. Because the Quran, it speaks about people who are on Hajj, that all they make dua for is dunya. Rabbana atina fid dunya. That's where the dua stops. And then it juxtaposes to another group of people. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. Wa fil akhirati hasana. Wa kina adab an-nar. right? So the first group, they're not even asking for what is beautiful or good in the dunya. They're just saying, give me dunya. You want to ask for something in the dunya, make sure you're asking of something that is good in the dunya, and then you add to it goodness in the next world, the akhirah, and a protection from pits of chastisement in the world beyond this one. But use part of the day tomorrow to make dua. All the people that you like talking to, that's great. Just talk to Allah some time tomorrow. And then 2 days from now on Wednesday, we're going to have our Eid prayers in Washington Square Park. Make special dua today and tomorrow. It does not rain on Wednesday because it becomes really tough for us to cram everybody on the 10th floor next door. Right? So please make special dua that Allah, even if just for the portion of time that we're sitting in the park, that it's nice and dry, doesn't have to be sunny, right? But that it's not raining on us. But be here for Eid. Lastly, if you haven't done your udhiyah, the qurbani, we're running that campaign online, as well as this toy drive for hospitalized children that we've been doing for, this is the 8th year, right? There's Muslim kids, there's kids, just kids. They're in the hospital, and that's what their place is going to be on the day of Eid, right? And they're going to have a joy where you buy a toy for them, and they get to think, somebody's remembering me on this day of Eid. So you go to our website, go on our social media, make sure you get all of it done so that it's something that reaches the beneficiary in the time that it needs to, inshallah. So once we pray Maghrib, if you could stick around, join us for iftar, for dinner, inshallah. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. And Sheikh Amar Shukri will be here tomorrow as well, inshallah. Make dua. I just heard that his flights were also canceled. And so now he's just driving from Toronto back down here. So Allah grant him ease. He's got a friend he's driving with, but it's not an easy drive down. So inshallah, Allah make it easy for him and grant him a safe return home, inshallah.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.